Hey guys, tonight we drift into the warm, salt-scented air of the open Pacific, where stars reign overhead and the sea hums beneath you like a quiet drum. You're barefoot, balancing on the curved wooden deck of a massive double-hulled canoe, its lashings creaking gently as the waves roll beneath. In the distance, no lights, no shoreline, just open water stretching out in every direction, blue by day, black by night. You're here to learn what it takes to cross thousands of miles, boove ocean, without a compass, without a map, and definitely without GPS. You'll be lucky if you even remember which way is north. In fact, if you mess this up, you probably won't survive. But hey, no pressure, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing bedtime check-ins from all over the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The canoe you're standing on is wide enough for a family and long enough to sleep on. But everything feels narrow in the darkness. A soft breeze moves your hair beside you. A Polynesian elder his, skin toughened by salt and sun nods toward the water. He's not worried. You glance up at the sky. No compass, no North Star, and yet he tells you they've been doing this for centuries. No metal instruments, just instincts, stories, and stars. Lots of stars. You watch as he crouches near the bow, dipping his fingers into the water and tasting the salt. Not for thirst, for clues. Saltiness changes with underwater currents, with proximity to reefs, with shifting wind patterns. You feel silly for not knowing that he doesn't judge. He just chuckles and says, "Moonlight shows the truth." You follow his gaze to the ocean's surface. The moon is rising now, fat and golden, casting a shimmering path across the rippling water. But the elder isn't looking at the light directly. He watches the flickering edges, the way the wavelets scatter moonlight at angles. This is not poetic. This is practical navigation. See, when moonlight hits waves in a certain way, it reveals the direction of prevailing swells. Swells tell stories, some from thousands of miles away. The elder explains that if you know which swell came from which island chain, and how they crash or don't crash into each other, you can tell where you are, even if you haven't seen land in days. It's like listening to a conversation you can't hear, but feeling the tension between the lines. As the canoe glides forward, you begin to notice how stable it feels. Not like the rocking boat rides you remember. This craft is built for balance. 4 long hauls across terrifying distances. Historians still argue whether these voyages were planned or accidental, whether brave souls like yours truly actually set out knowing there was land ahead, or if they got lucky after weeks drifting and guessing. But then the elder gestures again to the rhythmic way the canoe cuts diagonally across the swells, not against them. It's intentional. No one just drifts like this. You sit down beside a small bundle near the mast and realize it's not cargo, it's a child, fast asleep, curled in a woven mat. The child has no fear, no life jacket, no radio. That kind of trust only comes from generations of experience. The elder whispers that every family in the village learns something about the ocean, not just how to swim or fish, but how to listen. The sea is not just water, he tells you. It's a memory. There's a beat of silence, and then the canoe tips ever so slightly. You lean the other way instinctively, but the elder just smiles. Shark passed under. You freeze. Big one. Not hunting. Just curious. And just like that, your heart goes on a gentle sprint while he grabs a dried banana leaf, fans the child lazily, and offers you a bit of roasted taro like it's snack time in paradise. You chew and look out into the dark, suddenly aware that you're floating in a small wooden vessel over thousands of feet of open ocean, in shark territory, with only the stars and a sleepy grandpa for navigation, relaxing right above you. The sky begins to rotate. At first, it's subtle, but then you start noticing the constellations sliding westward, hour by hour. The Southern Cross climbs upward like a divine anchor, while Orion tilts like he's trying to swim. The elder names each star softly, as if greeting old friends. He doesn't point with his finger, he points with his chin. It's a respectful thing, Dot, as you listen. You realize that Polynesian navigation wasn't about memorizing one point on the compass. It was about memorizing many. Hundreds of stars rising and setting in consistent arcs across the horizon. They used these stars to form star paths or star lines, imaginary straight lines from one point on the ocean to another. Navigate one star path until your guiding star sets, then switch to the next star, and then the next. Like stepping stones in the sky, the elder suddenly asks if your ears pop. You tilt your head. They don't. Good, he says. We're leaving shallow waters, deeper ocean now. He can tell from the silence beneath the waves. The soft thump of water under the hull has changed pitch. It's as if the ocean itself is singing in a different key. Not all of this is science. Some of it is ... a little weird. One story he shares involves a woman who could dream of the stars' positions before a voyage, predicting weather 3 nights out. Another navigator could feel magnetic pull in his jawbone, thanks to an old accident that left metal in his cheek. Quirky, absolutely. But every time you think these stories are exaggerated, the canoe hits a shift in current or wind, and the elder adjusts course before you even realize what changed. Eventually, the child stirs and blinks at the sky. He hums a short tune, then murmurs a word you don't understand. The elder smiles and says he's counting stars. Apparently, children learn the star songs before they learn to walk. Each verse describes a different direction, a different wind, a different destination. And just as you're beginning to feel your head grow heavy with all this information and salt air, the elder lets out a long sigh and says, "This is just the beginning." You lie back against the warm wood of the canoe, the stars wheeling slowly above. and wonder what other tricks these old masters have hidden beneath the surface of this vast, endless ocean. You wake, or maybe you never really slept, when the canoe lurches slightly, catching a cross-current you hadn't noticed. The sky has shifted. The Southern Cross is lower now, and a thin band of stars begins to wink into view along the eastern edge of the sky. You sit up slowly, rubbing your eyes. The elder is already watching, crouched at the stern, chewing on something tough and fibrous. He grunts softly and gestures toward the stars. This time, he wants you to see the pattern. He points not with a hand, of course, but a sharp lift of his chin toward a string of bright points stretching upward. You recognize Orion's belt, though he calls it something different. To him, it's the paddlers, 3 brothers eternally rowing their canoe across the night sky. The positions of their stars shift ever so slightly, night after night, as the earth spins and drifts. But to a Polynesian navigator, that drift is a breadcrumb trail. Back home, you probably only glance at the stars on a walk back from the mailbox, if that. But here, under this inky dome of night and salt wind, the stars are your only landmarks. They tell you which direction to sail, how far you've come, and which islands lie waiting beyond the curve of the earth. No compass needed, just a brain full of constellations and a steady boat. The elder explains it in his own Wayno math, no degrees, just memories and metaphors. Star lines are like invisible highways, he says, each one anchored to the rising and setting point above a star. You memorize them as pairs. When star A rises there, it sets over that island. When star B disappears below the horizon, you're almost halfway to another land. You feel like you're back in elementary school, except your teachers are constellations and your exams are several hundred miles long. One of the quirkiest things he shares is that some navigators used a special chant not just for remembering the stars, but for feeling their positions when clouds covered the sky. The rhythm of the chant kept track of time and direction simultaneously, almost like a celestial metrome. You lie back again and stare upward. More stars appear now. The Milky Way is beginning to stretch across the sky like a spilled trail of powdered sugar. The elder tells you this band was called the backbone of night. Not just pretty words, this thing was used to split the sky into halves, to mark equatorial crossings, to realign mental maps when the boat turned off course. Some navigators say it told them where the spirit world touched the sea. Others used it like an actual divider, separating the sky into useful quadrants. Historians still argue whether the Polynesians relied more on fixed celestial maps, or if they navigated dynamically, updating position based on observed changes. One theory insists they used the stars like signposts. Another claims they used mental charts that rotated with time, essentially acting like a living GPS clock. Either way, it's not about knowing a single star, it's about remembering how that star moves across seasons, years, lifetimes. A child born under one configuration of stars might take his first voyage under a completely different sky. but the logic behind it, timeless. You begin to wonder how they practiced this stuff. Surely you don't just wake up one day and start navigating between Tahiti and Hawaii like it's a morning jog. The elder laughs when you ask. He points to the horizon and tells you that children started learning at dawn and dusk the times, when the stars rise or fade. That's when you can catch the motion, not just the presence. They would sit in dugout classrooms, not with blackboards, but with water and sky as their teachers. You'd memorize sequences like Aldebaran rises just before Venus when you're near Samur, or Antares dips after Scorpius when you're west of the Tuolmatus. One boy in the elder's old village, he says, memorized 150 stars before his 10th birthday. Another girl could sing the name of every star that appeared in a full year's night sky in the right order, with beats marking their rise and set positions. School talent shows must have been incredible. Suddenly, a gust of wind flutters the sail, and the elder grabs a rope, adjusting course ever so slightly. You didn't even feel the shift, but he did. You realize something humbling. It's not just knowledge, it's awareness, constant, unbroken, lifelong attention to things most people never even notice. The stars, the swell, the tilt of the canoe, the shadows on the sail. The stars begin to rotate again, slowly. You try to follow them, to trace invisible lines between them. Your mind drifts. What if you forget the pattern mid-voyage? What if the clouds roll in and you can't remember which star was due east? What if you think it's the wrong one? The elder's only response is a shrug and a smile. Then you ask the fish. You blink. Ask the fish. He won't explain. Not yet. Instead, he hums softly a sleepy, looping tune that sounds almost like a lullaby. As he hums, he points to a new group of stars rising in the east. These are the stars that guide the canoe tonight. These stars rise like clockwork, announcing the path to land that no telescope has ever seen. Back in the real world, sailors with compasses and GPS still get lost. Modern boats drift for weeks. But these people, in hand-carved canoes, using nothing but stars in memory. They reached Hawaii. They reached Rapa Nui. They reached New Zealand. And they didn't just stumble upon them, they returned. You roll onto your side, the canoe creaking gently. The stars above are sharp, ancient, precise. They speak in a language older than maps, older than words, older even than history. And here you are trying to listen. The sky fades slowly from black to indigo, the kind of pre-dawn light that makes everything feel like it's holding its breath. The stars begin to blur, retreating one by one into the growing brightness. And for a brief, quiet moment, the sea and the sky seem to merge into one seamless dome of shifting blue. You rub your eyes and stretch a little. No alarms, no coffee, just the gentle sway of the canoe and the soft rush of water against wood. The elder is already awake. He never really slept, you suspect. His eyes are fixed on the horizon, where the sky is paling into a promise of morning. You look where he looks, and you see nothing, just more ocean. No land, no birds, no boats. Yet the elder nods and says, "We're close." You raise an eyebrow. Based on what? He lifts his chin and murmurs, "The fish." Ah yes, the fish. You didn't forget. The explanation comes in fragments. Turns out, Polynesian navigators weren't just watching the sky. They were reading the ocean like a living book. And in that book, fish were one of the most informative chapters. Some fish only swim near land. Others migrate along deep ocean ridges. Some dart through currents that roll off distant islands, leaving behind tiny but traceable trails. The elder tells you that before land comes into view, the ocean tells the secret first. Stiff, you know how to ask politely. This morning, the elder leans over the edge of the canoe and drags his fingers through the water. The current is slightly cooler. He reaches into a small woven basket and pulls out a dried leaf, dips it in, and watches how it floats. Drift pattern changed, he says. Eddies. Historians still argue whether Polynesians actively studied marine biology or just absorbed it over generations. The difference hardly matters when you can recognize a flying fishes, take-off sound, or identify a school of tuna just from a shimmer near the surface. According to the elder, some schools behave like road signs. Milkfish often lead toward freshwater springs on island coasts. Mackerel clusters suggest underwater reefs. Dolphins, always a good sign. They're basically the sea's version of helpful neighbors, but one of the quirkiest methods involves watching the birds that follow the fish. You squint into the sky, now softly glowing with morning haze, and notice dark shapes circling overhead. "Nadies," the elder whispers. You assume that's an insult, but no, he means the seabirds. They don't stray far from land. He explains how their morning flight paths often point back toward their roosts, which, you guessed it, means land. Back on land, people check their phone for directions to the grocery store. Out here, they study the flight pattern of a frigate bird for 30 seconds and decide it's time to turn northeast. Your mind drifts a little as the canoe slices through the morning swell. The sun peaks over the horizon, casting that golden rim of light that makes the ocean look like it's edged in fire. The air grows warmer, and you can smell faint hints of saltweed and driftwood scents you hadn't noticed before. Maybe land. Reelers nearby then. The elder does something odd. He starts humming a tuna, different one than before. This melody is sharper, faster, more rhythmic. You ask him what it means. For the bonito, he replies. Turns out, each kind of fish has its own chant, not just for catching, but for finding. These chants are tied to rhythms in the sea. Time of day they appear, the shape of the waves they follow, the direction of their swim. By singing, he's syncing his thoughts with the sea's pattern, keeping his body attuned to when and where a school might breach. And it's not just for him. Some voyaging crews would sing together, matching the rhythm of paddles or sails to the beat of known fish migrations. Imagine rowing across the Pacific while chanting shark line, reef line. Skipjack sings over and over again. Weird, absolutely, but also effective. These chants were part calendar, part compass, part morale booster. You wonder how they even discovered all this. The elder simply says, watch long enough, you learn. No science labs, no whiteboards, just centuries of patient observation. You realize that most of us don't look at anything long enough to really understand it, not even our own backyard, let alone an ocean. One quirky tidbit he adds: some fish leave bubble trails when the water is warm enough. He swears Pear can smell a school before he sees them, like a sour, salty puff of breeze. You doubt your nose could do that, but you try anyway. Sniff. Nothing. Just the faint scent of sun-warmed wood and whatever was left in the elder's lunch pouch. The sun climbs higher. The birds multiply. They aren't circling anymore there. Dive in. You watch a tern shoot downward like a dart and surface with something silver in its beak. The elder's grin widens. They know before we do. Now he points again not to the birds, but to the clouds. Reef clouds, he says, his tone reverent. You squint. To you, it's just a big fluffy thing. But he explains that clouds over land, especially low islands or atolls, tend to gather differently. They stretch wider, sit lower, reflect light in distinct ways. A dark underside might mean it's reflecting a forest. A halo effect, probably white sand or reef. If you ever wondered how someone spots a tiny atoll in 2 million square miles of open ocean, this is how bird patterns, fish behavior, dour in cloud shadows. Historians still debate whether cloud watching counted as a primary navigational technique or just a confirmation tool. But here, in this canoe, you start to get it. The sky and sea aren't separate. They're in constant conversation, whispering clues if you know how to listen. Finally, after what feels like a full hour of teasing, the elder gives a sharp whistle and points dead ahead. At first, you see nothing, just a shimmer, then a slight bulge, a wrinkle in the sea's fabric. And then the unmistakable shape of an island, distant, faint, but real. You feel something well up in your chest. Not relief exactly, but awe. You weren't just floating aimlessly. You were being guided by fish, by birds, by water temperature and salt content, by stars and chants and clouds. And the elder, he never once looked lost. You lean back, the canoe cutting toward land, and you whisper to yourself, we're going to make it. By and somewhere beneath the boat, a school of fish swims on heading the same way. The island grows slowly, like a dream unfolding. First, it's just a smudge, like someone dabbed charcoal on the horizon. Then it becomes shape, then depth, then textured trees, hills, the flash of white where a wave breaks over a reef. The canoe glides forward, steady as a heartbeat. The elder doesn't speak, but the corners of his mouth lift in quiet satisfaction, like someone who's baked a perfect loaf of bread without measuring a single ingredient. He didn't need to see it. He already knew it was there. You sit up straighter now, your eyes wide open, trying to take it all in. You feel something ancient stir in your chest, a mix of wonder and humility, like you've been allowed to witness the secret ceremony. You're not discovering the island. It's revealing itself to you, because you asked politely. But now the elder's attention turns elsewhere. He dips a hand into the water again, feeling its pull. Then he tells you something that makes your eyebrows rise. The ocean swells speak to. Wait. What this time, his lesson is slower, more deliberate. He instructs you to lie back, close. Pour your eyes and feel. Not just the movement of the canoe, but the pattern of that movement. So you try. The boat rises, then dips, then again. But wait, there's a second rhythm beneath the first. A longer, lazier heave, then a third faint, but distinctly diagonal. It's like the canoe is caught in 3 invisible hands, each tugging it a different way. You're no longer just floating, you're in a web of pulses and waves, like being rocked by the breath of giants. This is swell reading, the elder explains. One of the most subtle land, arguably most mind-blowing Polynesian techniques. The Pacific isn't one ocean. It's dozens layered on top of each other. Each island, reef, and trench leaves a fingerprint in the water. Those fingerprints ripple outward in the form of swells broad, slow-moving undulations that travel hundreds, even thousands of miles. And here's the wild part. Each island's swell has a signature. If you memorize how your home island's swell feels, you can recognize when you're moving away from a tour toward another. Skilled navigators could tell when they'd crossed the edge of a swell zone, like stepping into a new climate. Some even claimed to hear it through the hull of the canoe, like the low hum of a cello string. Historians still argue whether this method was consciously practiced or more of an intuitive art passed down unconsciously. But several modern experiments they actually tested. This confirmed that trained navigators could detect direction changes using swell patterns alone, even blindfolded. No joke. You try to imagine that skill showing up on a resume. Can feel islands through my feet. Not exactly linked in material, but far more impressive. The elder says that sometimes, on especially quiet nights, he can feel 2 swells cross, one under each foot. He says it like he's talking about an old lover. You try to feel it too, letting the boat's movements wash over you, and slowly you do. One rhythm north-south, another maybe southeast. You can't name them, but they're there. One quirky tidbit he shares on long voyages. Some navigators slept curled in the hull, not because it was comfortable, but to listen better. The canoe's curves amplified the swell patterns, like living inside a musical instrument, with the sea playing notes against your spine. You think of modern ships with sonar and radar and GPS, and yet here, an old man and his ribs can accomplish nearly the same thing. He says some masters could even steer by swell alone, adjusting course based on how the boat shifted under their knees. You doubt you'll reach that level today, but still, you wiggle your toes and swear the water feels different now. The sun is climbing fast, the sky now fully lit. The birds from earlier are gone returned to land. The clouds have changed again, thinner and higher. But the elder is watching the waves, not the whitecaps, but the long undercurrent, the pulse beneath the noise. He explains that near land, swells bounce. They hit shorelines or reefs and rebound at angles, creating reflected waves. These interactions can make patterns, sometimes chaotic, sometimes orderly, like a giant's fingerprint pressed into the sea dot. And if you know your island well enough, you recognize its fingerprint. You ask how he learned all this. He shrugs again. Watched the old ones. Then the water taught me. A better answer than any textbook could give. You realize most of us are used to learning in boxes with chairs and tests and clocks. But here, time is measured in star risings and tide cycles. Tests come as storms. And the reward isn't a certificate, it's survival. Now the canoe slows. Not because anyone pulls a brake, but because the swell grows confused, shorter, choppier. The elder smiles. Reef ahead. You peer into the distance and finally spot it. The shimmer of pale green water over coral, that telltale fringe of foam, a lagoon dot, and beyond it, a stretch of beach that looks so untouched, so impossibly pristine. You swear it was drawn by a child with the perfect crayon. The elder lets out a breath and pats the side of the canoe. She knew the way. You realize he doesn't mean the stars or fish or swells. He means the canoe itself. Each part of the Voyager conversation between wood and sea dot. You feel different now. Not just like a passenger, but a student. Not just a tourist, but a traveler. And as you glide toward the shore, with water slipping beneath and sunlight warm on your face, you think back to how this journey started, not with maps or motors, but with memory and listening and learning to feel what most people ignore. You were never really lost. You just hadn't learned to hear the ocean yet. Your feet touch the island's sand, soft as sifted flour, warm underfoot from a sun that rose not long ago. You feel a bit unsteady at first, not because the ground is moving, but because your body still hums with the rhythm of the sea. The elder steps off the canoe without so much as a splash. He doesn't look back. His gaze sweeps the island like someone returning home rather than arriving for the first time. You follow him up the beach, past scattered driftwood and ghost crabs that scurry into holes at your shadow. And now, for the first time since your journey began, you asked the obvious question: how did the very first Polynesians even decide to go exploring this way? I mean, who looks at thousands of miles of open ocean and thinks, yeah, let's see what's out there. The elder chuckles. Same way birds know when to fly. You just feel it. Well, historians still argue whether early Polynesian expansion was planned exploration, accidental drift, or a mix of both. Some suggest storms pushed fishing canoes into unknown waters. Others insist it was deliberate, based on oral traditions, migration chants. and family lore of lands beyond the horizon. But either way, one fact remains. Starting about 3,000 years ago, Polynesian voyagers left the relative safety of the western Pacific places like Tonga and Samoa and pushed further than any other seafaring culture of their time. And they didn't just island hop nearby. They leaped thousands of kilometers in some cases. Imagine crossing the entire US in a canoe with no GPS, no compass, and no metal nails in your boat. Just wind, waves, memory, and some fish with attitude. You walk deeper into the trees, hearing the rustle of fronds above and the crunch of dry leaves below. The elder is leading you inland, toward a clearing where flat stones form a rough circle. He gestures for you to sit. Around you, carved into bark and stone, are symbols, swirls, lines, stars. He tells you these are part of the cumulative origin chants. You're not here just to rest. You're here to listen. And that's when he begins to chant. His voice is low, almost a growl, like the rumble of a coming storm. You can't understand every word, but the rhythm takes hold. It's less like a story and more like an incantation. You feel history swirl around you, names of ancestors, names of winds, of stars, of paths long vanished beneath the waves. These weren't just poems, they were blueprints. Some chants included navigational sequences listing star lines, ocean features, even the order in which islands should appear. You blink. Wait, these people didn't just memorize maps. They sang them. Yes, and get this. Some of the longest navigation chants had hundreds of lines, passed down orally, word for word, generation after generation. No books, no backup copies. If one link in the chain forgot, the knowledge could vanish forever. That's probably why it was such a guarded skill. Not everyone got to learn. Navigators or wayfinders were chosen young, taught to observe, to remember, to respect. Training took years. It wasn't just about routes. It was about reading time, tide, mood, even silence. The elder tells you his own teacher once made him sit beside the ocean for 4 days straight without speaking, just watching. When I finally heard the rhythm, he says, I could never unhear it. And now you're starting to hear it too. One quirky tidbit he shares. Some chants describe mythical creatures that guard specific currents, like a giant eel that sleeps under a channel between two islands. It's not a literal belief, but a way to remember that crossing that stretch of water is tricky, prone to sudden storms or deceptive calm. It's poetic danger coding. You think of it as oceanic folklore with practical punch. You look up. The sky is high and wide now, birds circling lazily overhead. Somewhere behind you, the canoe bobs quietly at anchor. You realize the journey wasn't over when you reached land. The land itself is part of the navigation. Polynesians didn't just remember where places were. They remembered what they felt like. The smell of the trees, the shape of the mountains, the sound of the wind at dusk. All these became part of a navigator's mental map. The elder gestures to a nearby rock formation and says it's shaped like a sleeping boar. He says when you sail south from here, the first island you reach will have a cliff shaped like the boar's tusk. It's metaphor and geography entwined. Historians call this cognitive mapping. But out here, it's just the way things are. You don't use coordinates, you use stories. He invites you to try one of the chants. You repeat after him, syllable by syllable. The language feels strange in your mouth-rounded vowels, clipped ends, but the rhythm is comforting. You're not just learning words, you're inheriting a pattern, a frequency that has echoed across centuries. He nods approvingly. It will help you remember your way back, and that's the point. Every chant, every carving, every myth isn't just about finding new places. It's about not forgetting where you came from. You sit quietly for a while longer. The wind rustles the trees. A gecko chirps in the distance. You feel the island breathe around you. And though you've only just arrived, you feel more at home than you expected. The afternoon deepens, and the sunlight softens into a warmer Huheni gold dripping through palm fronds. The elder rises from the stone circle with a creak of knees and a smile that says you've passed some kind of invisible test. He motions for you to follow him back toward the canoe, which now rests lightly in the shallows, bobbing like a lazy heartbeat. You're not setting off just yet, but the next part of your education, he says, isn't on land. It's in the fish. You laugh. It sounds like a joke. It isn't. As you step back into the canoe, he hands you a woven basket empty, for now hand, points toward deeper water, not too far. Just enough for the horizon to open its arms again. As the canoe glides forward, he begins to speak in a low, patient tone, like a father explaining the secrets of the universe to a child who's just stopped asking why and started listening. Fish tell stories, he says, where they swim, how they swim, when they stop. You raise an eyebrow. Fish as navigators. You're used to thinking of fish as dinner knot, daughter. But he goes on. He explains that certain fish species only appear near specific islands or underwater ridges. Tuna, for example, prefer particular currents. Flying fish often signal open ocean nearby, while reef fish mean you're close to land. You start to realize this isn't superstition. It's pattern recognition of the highest order. The ocean is a living field. You just have to know how to read its scales. Historians still debate how intentional this method was. Some argue Polynesian navigators only accidentally observed fish behavior, while others insist it was a formal part of training. But when you hear the elder talk about it, there's nothing accidental here. He describes entire stretches of ocean by the movement of species. This far west, you'll see Aku jumping at dusk. Turn north there. Follow the skipjack. You lean over the edge of the canoe, eyes straining into the blue. Nothing at first, but then, just as he described, a flicker of silver, then a splash. Flying fish. They erupt from the water in tiny bursts, shimmering like tossed coins in the sun. You gasp. It feels like magic, but he just nods. They're running. from something. Bigger fish nearby. And sure enough, a moment later, you see shadows below the surface, long and fast. Predators. The elder grins. Now we know what the current's doing. Turns out, fish behavior isn't random. Fish follow the food, which follows the currents, which follow the winds. So when you observe the fish, you're indirectly reading the entire system. It's like checking traffic reports by watching how birds fly. He tells you a story passed down from his grandfather, how once, during a voyage between islands, their canoe got caught in a cloudy current. They couldn't see the stars, no birds, but then they spotted a lone kawakawa, a patterned tuna, not where it should have been. It was swimming north against expectation. That tiny decision saved them within a day. They spotted land. You blink. One fish, one clue. That's all it took. One quirky fact he shares. Some navigators claimed they could smell different fish in the wind. Not the fish themselves, but the faint trace of seaweed or plankton, or even the oils that certain schools release during migration. It sounds exaggerated till you notice that the elder constantly sniffs the air like a dog picking up a trail. You do it too, and swear you catch a salty sharpness that wasn't there before. Then he drops another surprise. Sometimes they listened for fish, not like sonar, but with ears pressed against the canoe hull or waterline. In calm waters, some brief fish make clicking or popping sounds like wet rice crackling. The presence or absence of those sounds told seasoned navigators if they were drifting too far from land. Your ears aren't trained, but he encourages you to try. You lower your head. Silence at first, but then a soft series of clicks, like a distant popcorn machine. Your jaw drops. You've never heard water sound like this. The canoe drifts now, lazily caught in a swell. The elder trails his fingers in the water, eyes half-lidded like he's remembering something sweet. He says the best navigators don't chase fish, they invite them. Move at the right speed, hold the right silence, and the fish will come. You're not a predator out here. You're a partner. He pulls in a small line with a glinting hook at the end. Not for catching today's, just for watching. He dangles it, bin the water, murmuring something in a language that feels older than breath. A shadow flits past, then another, just enough to show you they're listening to. Historians have found ancient fishhooks carved from pearl shell and bone. Some so delicately made they look like jewelry, but their real value wasn't in dinner. It was in direction, knowing what bit, where, and when. Told you what season it wasn't, what part of the sea you were in. That as the sun begins its descent, the water turns a deeper blue, darkening at the edges like ink soaking into paper. The elder begins to hum a tune with no words, but steady, like the glide of the canoe. You hum too. You don't know the melody, but it doesn't matter. You've already learned to hear the ocean differently, to notice what it says through its smallest swimmers. And suddenly, navigation doesn't seem like a mystery anymore. It feels like something you always knew, just waiting for you to remember. The horizon leans toward dusk, that gentle pause between gold and indigo, and the canoe rocks softly beneath you like it's cradling a secret. By now, you've learned to watch the water not just for waves, but for everything else: shadows, flashes, vibrations, even silence. But the elder isn't finished yet. He taps your shoulder and gestures toward the sky. It's time for the stars. He points up, not just randomly, but with the precision of someone who's memorized every freckle on the face of the night. You follow his hand to a cluster of lights just emerging through the fading blue. "That's Hakula," he says. You blink. "You mean Venus." He grins. "Yes, but out here we name it for what it does, not just what it is." And this is where the real magic happens. Because Polynesian wayfinders didn't just admire the stars. They used them like a GPS constellation written in poetry. Each rising star, each setting one, corresponded with a specific direction. The moment it touched the horizon, it anchored a line of travel across the sea. You think of it as a massive, invisible compass, 360 degrees, mapped by light, and every voyager held that map in their head. Historians agree Polynesian star navigation was among the most advanced in the world. They knew not just individual stars, but whole families organized into star lines that stretched across the night sky like railways on a cosmic grid. Want to head northeast, sail toward where Altair rises south. Follow Canopus as it dips, want to return home. Wait for Sirius to rise at the same angle you left. But here's the quirky twist. Some wayfinders didn't even look at the stars. They'd lie on their backs in the canoe, eyes closed, feeling the canoe's angle and the pull of the wind, letting the stars' positions sink into their skin. You try it. It feels silly at first, but then strangely right. The canoe becomes your bed, your map, your rhythm. The elder hums again, soft and slow. This time and explains that some navigators learned as many as 150 stars, each with a precise azimuth or angle of rise. He doesn't use that word. He says they rise like relatives, each from their own doorway in the sky, and every night the doorways shift. This is the part where it gets even trickier, because the stars don't rise in the same place every night. The earth tilts, the sky drifts over the year, constellations move. So wayfinders had to know seasonal variation. They didn't just know where a star is. They knew when it gets there and when it leaves. Historians still argue whether all Polynesian islands used the same star maps or whether each region had its own system. Some oral traditions vary the names or use different constellations entirely. But the fundamental idea remains consistent. The night sky was a clock, a compass, and a storybook. And you're reading it now. He shows you how to extend your hand, measure in finger widths above the horizon to estimate altitude. Each finger is about 1 degree. You hold your hand up, the stars just 2 fingers above the ocean line. He nods. You're about halfway there. Halfway where? He doesn't say maybe back, maybe forward. The stars don't just guide travel either. They mark events. Certain pairs of stars rising together signaled planting season. Others meant the start of dangerous storms. The helical rising of the Pleiades, called Matari, was a big deal. It marked the beginning of the food-rich half of the year in many cultures. One particularly poetic idea. Some navigators used dark constellations. Instead of connecting the dots of stars, they watched the spaces between them. Clouds of interstellar dust shaped like birds, fish, or canoes. By. You glance up, trying to imagine it not the stars themselves, but the negative space. A canoe-shaped hole in the Milky Way. It's there. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. The canoe slows as the elder throws a stone. Anchora, simple one, carved and tied with rope. You're staying here for a bit to let the sky reveal more of itself. He tells you a final tale before sleep of a young apprentice who sailed too early, trusting a single star. A storm came. He panicked, but as he floated, the stars came back. He remembered that if Altair rose behind his left shoulder, he could drift home. It took 5 days. By he made it. That story lives on in the charts. And now, the stars are all out, glittering in a dome so full it seems to spill light into the ocean. You lie back. The canoe barely moves. The sea has gone glassy and dark. There's no wind, just the creak of wood and your own breath, steady as a tide above you. The sky spins slowly, not in chaos, but in a grand, sweeping rhythm. And for the first time, you understand something wild. You are not lost in the universe. You are inside its compass. The canoe floats in that midnight lull, where everything is quiet, so quiet, it almost feels sacred. You lie on your back, staring at the sky until your eyes blur and the stars become a silver smear. The elder hasn't spoken in a while. Neither have you. Out here, silence isn't awkward. It's part of the language. Eventually, he sits up and says softly, "Now we talk about swells." Swells. You glance around at the nearly flat sea and wonder what he means. But then you notice Etan, almost imperceptible rise and fall, like the ocean is breathing beneath you. Not waves, not chop, not anything dramatic, just a long, slow undulation that moves beneath the canoe, like the belly of some enormous, sleeping beast. He nods at your confused face. Swells travel thousands of miles. They're old, ancient. We sail with them. And so begins your lesson in reading the water not with your eyes, but with your body. Polynesian navigators learned to detect swell direction by standing with feet wide on the canoe's deck, or sitting cross-legged, or lying flat on the hull. They'd sense the angle, rhythm, and timing of each rise and dip, then adjust their heading accordingly. You try it now, sitting cross-legged, closing your eyes. At first, you feel nothing, but gradually, you begin to notice a subtle tug, then a tilt, then a roll back the other way. It's like learning to dance with someone who moves so slowly you have to stop breathing to keep time. Mainstream historians once dismissed this as myth or exaggeration. How could anyone possibly detect open ocean swells without instruments? But then came the voyages of Hoculier replica Polynesian canoe sailed without modern tools. And sure enough, the crew trained under traditional masters could feel at least 3 overlapping swells each from a different direction, each a relic of some faraway storm. The elder leans over and drops a small wooden stick into the water beside the canoe. You watch it bob. At first, it just floats, but then it starts drifting, not in the direction the wind is blowing, but slightly off. He nods. That's the primary swell. It's pointing west. You glance at the stars to, sure enough, the direction aligns. He then pulls out a second stick and sets it a few feet away. It moves differently, slower, almost sideways. That's a crossing swell, he says. Maybe from a storm near Tonga a week ago. You blink. He just tracked the ghost of a storm using a floating stick. Here's your quirky fact for the night. Some navigators could name these swells. Not just north or south, but actual names old. Poetic ones like Ka Moe for the trade wind swell, or Nuku Alofa for the swells that passed near a certain island chain. It's like learning the dialects of an invisible conversation between oceans. You shift in your seat, now hyper-aware of the canoe's every tilt and bounce. The elder explains how the canoe reacts if the bow rises too sharply. You're heading into the swell. If it rolls left, it's crossing the swell. If it feels calm and flat, you're aligned with the swell's direction. It's not just choreography. Historians still argue whether Polynesians used intentional instruments to track swells. Some believe they used weighted ropes or sticks. Others say it was entirely muscle memory. But the principle is always the same. The ocean carries long echo. If you listen carefully, you can hear where it's been. You try lying flat against the hull, like he suggested earlier. Your spine molds to the wood. Your chest rises and falls with the swell. For a moment, you feel like you're floating in bum water. It's disorienting and mesmerizing at the same time. The canoe isn't a boat anymore. It's an extension of your body, and the swell becomes your pulse. The elder tells you about Itax, a mental map system that combines swells, stars, and time. You imagine holding a string in your mind with knots marking each landmark. Only the string is invisible. The landmarks are often made up. A specific swell paired with a star is near Island X, even if the island isn't real. It's a psychological gridder trick of the brain that lets you build structure in open chaos. He chuckles, rubbing his knees. You don't sail to a place. You sail to a feeling, a memory. That line hits harder than you expect. You remember every time you felt lost, whether at sea or on land, and how sometimes the only way to move forward was to listen to something deeper than logic. The swell continues beneath you, steady, patient, whispering. You feel yourself adjusting unconsciously now, leaning slightly when the canoe tips, shifting your weight without thinking. It's not unlike learning to ride a bike, but instead of handlebars, you're guided by a rhythm older than time. The elder reaches into a carved wooden box and pulls out a small bundle wrapped in tapa cloth. He unwraps it slowly, revealing a small shell cowrie. This, he says, was from my grandfather's canoe. He said when you can feel which direction this shell would drift in a swell, you're ready to guide others. He hands it to you. It's light, smooth. You hold it in your palm and close your eyes. The swell tugs faintly beneath you. The shell shifts in your grip just slightly. You think no. You feel that it wants to go west. You open your eyes. He's already watching you. You're listening now, he says. And you are. Not just to him, not just to the sea, but to yourself. The stars have wheeled farther west, dipping lower now, and the canoe drifts quietly, as if even it knows the night is deep. You sit with the cowrie shell still in your hand, its surface warm from your palm. The elder hasn't spoken in some time. He's letting the silence do the talking, because out here, silence is where memory lives. Then, almost out of nowhere, he says, "Smell the wind." You pause, sniff the air. It's salty. Sure, maybe a touch of seaweed. But he means something deeper than that. He closes his eyes, takes a deep inhale, then points slightly to the northeast. There's land that way. Smell it, you squint, confused. But now you're intrigued, because apparently Polynesian navigators could sometimes smell islands before they could see them. Here's where things start to sound like wizardry, except they're not Polynesian wayfinders trained. Their senses beyond what most of us ever consider. In the absence of modern instruments, they turned to every available clue, and scent was one of them. If the wind blew consistently from a certain direction, and you were close enough, you might catch the scent of wet vegetation, volcanic rock, or blooming flowers carried over the ocean. Some even claimed they could distinguish specific islands like Tahiti from Rarotonga based on the air. Mainstream historians agree this was possible, though rare. You'd need just the right wind, the right proximity, and a good nose. But stories persist of canoes adjusting course simply because someone said, "It smells like taro leaves tonight." And here's your quirky fact. There are even tales of birds helping out migratory birds like frigate birds or noddies that would fly out to sea during the day and return to land by nightfall. Navigators would release one from the canoe. If it circled and came back, no land nearby. If it flew off in a straight line and didn't return, they'd follow the bird's path. Congratulations, you've just reversed engineered your own homing pigeon GPS. The elder points to the sea again. There, he says. That's the glow. You follow his gaze. At first, you see nothing, but then your eyes adjust. There's a faint change in the sky, not exactly light, but less darker, subtle silver sheen hovering over the horizon. He nods. That's the reflection of starlight off land clouds. Land clouds? Yes, when clouds form above land at night, they reflect more starlight and moonlight than clouds over open sea. They appear puffier, more luminous. To a trained eye, this was a navigational signpost. You wouldn't head straight for it yet, but you'd remember it. Mark it in your mental map. Historians still argue whether this technique was widespread or more anecdotal, handed down from particularly sensitive navigators. But accounts from Tahitian and Micronesian sailors suggest this glow was observed and trusted. The elder tells you about Te Lapa, a mysterious phenomenon still not fully understood. It's described as brief, faint streaks of light like flashes shooting underwater from island direction. Some navigators swore by it. Others thought it was a kind of vision-induced illusion. Even modern scientists debate it. But stories remain of voyages that successfully found land, guided only by these phantom pulses of light. It sounds by and yet, out here, with nothing between you and the horizon, you start to believe that the ocean has ways of whispering secrets if you're still enough to hear them. He picks up a scoop of seawater and tosses it in your direction. You blink at the salt in your eye. Taste it, he says with a grin. You taste it. Yip salty. But then he does it again, scoops water, waits a second, then tosses from the other side of the canoe. Pass that, too. Oddly, ... less salty. He laughs at your expression. Near a freshwater plume, he says. Sometimes a big river meets the ocean far offshore. You find that, you find land. Another trick of the trade. That's your open. Debate for this section how much traditional navigation relied on this kind of fringe environmental sense work. Some scholars say it was anecdotal at best. Others argue it was essential, especially in final landfall stages. There's no universal answer, only overlapping traditions each, one tuned to its own ocean. You realize now that these wayfinders weren't just sailors. They were symphony conductors, reading dozens of subtle cues at once. The feel of the hull, the scent of wind, the direction of a bird's shadow, the flavor of water, the glow behind clouds. They stitched all of this together into a quiet, flowing intuition. And here's the kicker. This wasn't some elite priesthood. Many islanders, especially in older generations, were trained to observe these things from childhood. Navigation wasn't a profession. It was a culture, a worldview, an identity. You lean back against the hull, eyes still on the glow. The air smells richer now, like moist soil and maybe even fruit trees. Your imagination, maybe, but maybe not. The elder pats your shoulder. Land is close, but we don't rush. The sea decides. You nod. There's no hurry. The sky still spins overhead. The canoe drifts softly, and the world is still full of signs. If you know how to listen, the air feels different now. It's heavier, thicker, like it's holding its breath. The canoe rocks more gently, as if cushioned by something softer than open ocean. You shift your weight slightly, and the hull doesn't echo in that same hollow way. The elder's eyes narrow. We're in the island's shadow now, he says, almost reverently. You scan the horizon, searching for a silhouette of trees or coastline, but there's nothing yet. Only that strange silver glow. a subtle sweetness in the wind, and a sense more felt than known that something is near. You glance down at the water. It's changed, calmer somehow, and darker, less wave, more ripple, lagoon water, the elder murmurs, protected by a reef. And that's your new classroom, the invisible signs of reefs. To navigate the final approach to land, traditional Polynesian navigators learned to recognize reef systems, not with their eyes, but with everything else. You can't afford to get it wrong here. One misjudged swell, one hidden coral wall, and you're not just lost, you're wrecked. And remember, there's no lighthouse, no depth finder, just instinct, training, and decades of memory passed down in whispers. He dips his hand into the water again and lets it fall. The splash sounds wrong, too dull, too thick. He grins. Reef. Behind us now. We're inside. You furrow your brow. Inside what? He points out a subtle change in wave. Behavior far off ahead. Waves are breaking, but not here. That's the reef wall. The ocean hits it, crashes, and the turbulence dissipates before it reaches you. Inside that line, it's like sailing into a cathedral made of coral, gentle, quiet, cradled. Here's your mainstream. Historical fact. Reefs encircle many Polynesian islands like protective rings. These are called barrier reefs or atolls, and beside them, the water is significantly calmer, making landing easier. Many navigators used the sound of breakers far in the distance to orient themselves. Breaks in those sounds indicated safe passages or reef channels. The elder lifts piss chin. Listen, you strain your ears. And yes, you hear it. A low roar, continuous, soft like distant thunder. The reef breaking waves like a heartbeat against the bones of the sea. Here's a wonderfully weird tidbit. Some navigators trained children to memorize the sound of their home reef. Not just the volume, but the tone. Every reef had a unique voice depending on coral shape, wave direction, and wind. Blindfold a child, float them close to shore, and they could sometimes tell you which island they were near just by sound. That's how deeply place was embedded in the senses. You try, closing your eyes and just listening. The canoe glides forward in smooth silence. The ocean smells green now, if that's possible, vegetal, earthy, maybe mangroves, maybe coconut trees. You don't know. But it's not the blank solitaire of open ocean. Historians still argue whether Polynesians relied more on visual land finding or environmental cues like this in final approaches. Some believe high islands, those with volcanic peaks, were easy to spot days in advance. Others suggest that for low-lying atolls, you had to get within miles before any land became visible, meaning sensory cues were everything. The elder starts pulling at a rope, tightening the sail, adjusting your course slightly. You follow his eyes and spot something that makes your breath catch birds. A small flock darting low across the water, toward that silver blur on the horizon. He nods. Even they know where home is. You smile, remembering that earlier story. about frigate birds. These ones are different white terns. Maybe graceful, swift, and they're definitely on a mission. The canoe glides forward, slowly, gradually. A dark lump begins to take shape in the distance. It's still fuzzy, still dreamlike, but unmistakably their dot, land. It doesn't look like much at first, just a darker patch beneath the stars. But as you get closer, you make out textures, faint outlines of palm trees, the ghost of a beach, the uneven rise of volcanic ridges. You're struck by a strange mix of awe and disappointment. You've imagined this arrival for hours. Now that it's here, it's almost quiet. Number trumpets. No grand moment. Just a smooth gliding toward something that was always there, always waiting. The elder seems to read your thoughts. The journey was the important part, he says gently. Land is just the punctuation, that one hits you like a well-aimed paddle. He points again this time to a subtle notch in the tree line, a shadowy opening where the reef has a gap. We go through there, he says. Safe passage. Your heart beats faster. There's no GPS, no sonar. Just a memory passed from someone who's done this 100 times. And now you're following their echo. The canoe slides forward, closer to the reef break. The distant roar becomes louder, sharper, but it's off to the side now. You're threading the needle. In this moment, everything depends on trust. Trust in the wind, the swell, the canoe, and your teacher. Pew pass through the channel. The water calms even more. The air warms. Crickets chirp from somewhere, though you can't see them. And at last, the beach rises before you a curve of sand. White in the starlight, soft like a whisper. The canoe drags slightly as it slides onto shore. You step out. Your feet touch land that feels impossibly solid after so long adrift. The sand is cool and damp. You breathe in deep. It smells like fruit trees and volcanic rock and salt and thyme. You made it, but you're not the hero of this story. The ocean is written, and the men and women who listened to its voice long before satellites and GPS made it obsolete. Tonight, you followed those echoes, and they brought you home. The sand cools beneath your feet, almost silky, littered with the faint indentations of crabs and driftwood. Brush a hand along the side of the canoe, its hull still damp from the journey, and you realize you haven't just crossed miles, you've crossed centuries. Because everything you just did, the smell reading, the bird watching, the cloud guessing, that's old knowledge. And now that you're on solid ground, you get to learn how it was preserved. The elder doesn't speak for a long while. Instead, he kneels beside a small fire pit near the edge of the tree lines, starts placing kindling like he's done it 1,000 times, which he probably has. The silence is respectful. The flames rise, flickering soft orange into the night. A few other figures emerge from the shadows, young ones. You assume trainees, apprentices. Their eyes are bright, and they look at you not as a guest, but as someone who's passed a quiet test. And now comes your first lesson about the wayfinding schools. In traditional Polynesian cultures, there were no schools in the modern sense. No chalkboards, no desks, but the knowledge passed down about navigation, wayfinding was precise, structured, and rigorous, especially in places like Micronesia and the Society Islands. There were lineages of master navigators, often called Pwa or Taumakahu, carried the oral maps of the sea. To be taught by them was an honor, and not everyone made the cut. Here's a core mainstream fact. One of the best documented examples of this system is found among the Caroline Islanders, where the art of wayfinding was passed down by rote memorization, often in chants. These weren't sing-songs. They were living maps. A master navigator might teach a student a chant that listed dozens of stars, in order, each tied to a direction, a season, and a sailing route. Think of it like installing a mental compass. True poetry. Your quirky tidbit. These chants could be hundreds of lines long, and the student wouldn't move up until they could recite it perfectly, not just in words, but with the right breathing, tone, and cadence. One breath too short, and the rhythm was off. Bet mattered, because each pause often marked a directional change. The elder pokes the fire and begins to hum softly. You realize it's a chant. His voice is low, like gravel being rolled in a basket, and the young ones mouth the words with him. You don't understand the language, but you understand the gravity. One of the trainees, girl no older than 12, holds a palm leaf diagram in her lap. You lean closer and squint. It's covered in shells, sticks, and curves. Not random. Structured. Purposeful. That's a stick chart hand. It's more brilliant than it looks. Historians still argue about the precise function of these stick charts. Were they literal maps, abstract teaching tools, mnemonic devices? The truth may be all three. Play some charts, like those from the Marshall Islands, used bent sticks to show wave refraction around islands. Others mapped relationships between stars and atolls, but none were used at sea. They were studied on land, memorized, then left behind. A navigator never needed to bring the chart. The real map was inside them. The girl shows you a curved stick intersecting another. This is where the swells cross, she says, proud. You feel it in the canoe. You nod, impressed. If GPS ever fails, this girl will still get home. The elder motions you closer and draws a diagram in the Sander series of concentric circles. Star paths, he explains. Each circle represents a rising or setting point on the horizon. As you travel east or west, those points shift. A navigator had to memorize how the sky looked from dozens of positions, which meant they had to imagine the sky, not just watch it. You lean back, staring up at the Milky Way, and suddenly it feels overwhelming. How could anyone possibly remember so much? But here's the secret. They didn't memorize it all at once. It was layered, like song verses, like constellations building on constellations. From childhood, they'd play games naming stars as fast as possible, then tracing imaginary lines between them, then assigning emotions or stories to those lines. Star A is the jealous husband. Star B is his runaway wife. that wasn't just mythology, was a memory device. One navigator, Noah Thompson, described it as building an ocean in your mind. And once that ocean was built, you could sail it forever. The wind picks up slightly, carrying the scent of cooked breadfruit and coconut. A woman arrives with food, and the group shares a quiet meal. Nobody rushes, nobody boasts. There's a kind of humility here that's hard to describe. You sense that even the masters still consider themselves students. The elder asks you a question. What was the second star we followed? You freeze. Think back. You remember the Southern Cross. Then, was it Aldebaran? Sirius? You hesitate, and he just smiles. It'll come to you, and you realize this was your test. Not to reach land, but to remember how you reached it. That's the navigator's burden, not the voyage. The memory, your final thought before sleep edges in. This knowledge was never written down, not because it wasn't worthy, but because it was sacred, alive, and for something that lives. Paper was never the right home. It had to live inside people. The stars are still out when you wake, but the sky is beginning to fade from black to deep cobalt. One of those quiet, half-lit hours when everything seems to hold its breath. You stretch, muscles slightly sore from sleeping on woven mats, and rub your eyes just in time to spot the elder already walking toward the beach. Arms folded behind his back, gaze skyward. Without speaking, you follow. The others are slow to stir, but the sea never sleeps. And today, you're going to learn how time and tide become your watch and calendar. No gears, no hands ticking a wage, just moonlight, swell, and a body clock tuned to nature. You stand beside the elder as he points to the horizon, where the ocean and sky kiss in soft layers. This, he says, is when you learn to listen sideways. It doesn't make sense at first, but then he starts talking about time reckoning, not by sundials or clocks, but by stars, moons, tides, and wind behavior. This is the Polynesian clock, fluid, circular, and more precise than it seems. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In ancient Polynesia, days weren't numbered like ours. Time was marked by the lunar calendar, 28-day months tied to the phases of the moon. Each moon phase had a name, and certain days were best for fishing, planting, or vote. New moons often meant still water and darkness, useful cover for stealthy travel. Full moons brought higher tides, sometimes harder sailing. But time wasn't only about the moon. The rising of specific stars, called heliacal risings, signaled new seasons. For example, the first appearance of the Pleiades in the dawn sky marked the Polynesian New Year in many regions. That moment dictated everything from rituals to when you should mend your canoe. That the elder draws a line in the wet sand with his toe. When the moon is here, he says, gesturing toward the western sky. The tide will pull away before sunset. When she's overhead, the water rises strong. You realize he's reading the sea like a daily planner. Your quirky tidbit for today. Some navigators claimed They could feel the phase of the moon by how the canoe behaved on the water. That's right, just from the rise and fall of the waves, or the direction of the swell, they'd guess the lunar day. Whether that's actual physical sensitivity or decades of finely tuned memory and muscle response. Well, historians still argue whether that was literal or symbolic. But you can't help but wonder, because after everything you've seen so far, it seems pretty believable. You sit now, toes buried in the sand, as he begins to explain another concept: sun shadows. In the absence of a watch, Polynesian navigators used the angle and color of sunlight to guess the hour. A thin yellow sliver low on the ocean. Early morning, a hot white glare with no shadow under your paddle. That's noon. A golden burn that turns the canoe red from below. Dusk is near. You don't need a minute hand when your whole world ticks with rhythm. The sky brightens more, and now comes another clock. The birds. You watch as the horizon erupts with motion. Terns, noddies, and frigate birds begin their morning routines, some heading inland, others coasting out. The elder nods toward one. He's late, he always is. You raise an eyebrow. You know that bird. I know his habits, he says with a shrug. Not all clocks tick, some flap. And just like that, the morning becomes a symphony of cues. The tide creeping in, the wind shifting direction. Even the smell now, Brynja, more pungent, tells you the reef fish are waking up. You're surrounded by invisible hands tapping out the time. The younger trainees gather now, forming a circle around a low driftwood table. One places shells at each corner for directions. Bell begins building a calendar map. Each shell represents a moon phase, each stick a tidal range. This isn't a toy, it's a tool, a mind map of months and tides, built from things the ocean herself provides. The elder calls it a VA calendar, used to schedule voyages. Long-distance travel had to be timed precisely too early, and you risked stormy seas. Too late, and the trade winds might abandon you. A perfect window might last just days. And here's something oddly beautiful. Some Polynesian communities believed that a successful voyage wasn't just about direction, it was about timing. That the ocean only opened her arms on certain days when the stars aligned and the spirits agreed. If your timing was wrong, even the right path could turn you around. You ask if that's superstition, and the elder just chuckles. Or maybe it's experience dressed in poetry. You jot that down in your mental notebook. By midday, you've practiced telling time by cloud angle, wind scent, and wave tempo. It's less like checking a wristwatch, more like slipping into rhythm with the world. And you wonder, maybe humans weren't meant to fight time. Maybe we were supposed to feel it. A final thought before the heat sets in and everyone naps. You haven't seen a single number all day. No countdowns, no alerts, no buzzing phones. And yet, somehow, you've never felt more on time. The wind carries the scent of smoked pandanus leaves as the sun slides westward, turning everything golden. It's that delicious hour before each shadows grow long and the ocean takes on a glaze like melted glass. You're sitting with the elder again, but this time you're not just listening. You're building something, and it looks suspiciously like a small, lopsided canoe. He hands you a strip of coconut fiber cord and tells you to lash the outrigger. You look down, fumble a knot, then glance at the others who've already finished. One of the girls smirks, but doesn't say anything. You laugh and mutter, "I should have just brought duct tape," and the elder grins like he knows what that means, even if he doesn't. Today's focus isn't stars or tides, it's the tools of the trade. Because navigating open ocean is one thing, but surviving it, that takes the right gear and, even more importantly, the right materials. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Polynesian canoes weren't simple dugouts. They were engineering, marvels double-holed for balance, lashed with cordage rather than nails to flex with waves, and designed for speed and endurance. Some could carry over 50 people and weeks' worth of supplies. These weren't just boats. They were floating, diligent. But unlike modern yachts with GPS and steel keels, everything on these canoes had to come from the environment. Hulls were carved from breadfruit, koa, or tamanu trees, depending on the island. Sails woven from pandanus leaves, oiled and dried in layers until they caught the wind like canvas. No metal, no plastic, no screws, just clever design and deep respect for the materials. Now, here's your quirky tidbit. Polynesians even made emergency desalination tools using gourds and heated stones. That's right. Drop a hot stone in seawater inside a hollowed gourd with a lid. Capture the evaporated vapor and boil a drinkable water. It wasn't pleasant, but it worked. There's even oral history of wrapping seawater in specific leaf bundles that would very slowly reduce its salinity over days. A water bottle meets witchcraft situation. You finish your awkward knot, and the elder tests it with a single tug. It holds. Barely, but it holds. He gestures to a long bone hook hanging from a tree. "What fish is this for?" he asks. And you hesitate. You're used to rubber lures and plastic jigs, not this beautifully carved piece of what might have been a pig's femur. He explains, "This one's for mahi-mahi, but it can fool tuna if you add shell." Each hook was custom-made, not just for species, but for depth, tide, and time of day. It's like having a tackle box made of biology and intuition. You hold bit in your hand. The bone is warm from the sun, smooth, sharp, elegant. It reminds you how much can be done with so little. If you know, nearby, the younger trainees are preparing a fire with a strange wooden cone and a stick. You're about to ask where the matches are when one of them grinds the stick between her palms, faster and faster, until smoke curls up in a thread of gray. She blows on it gently, adds dried coconut husk, and it flares to life. No drama, just friction and focus. The elder nudges you. Your turn. Of course it is. And here's where your arms start to ache. But that's okay, because you're learning. That navigation wasn't just mental, it was physical. It was calluses, sunburn, salt-stung eyes, and perfectly packed bundles. A navigator had to carry ropes, patches, food stores wrapped in banana leaves, and sometimes even extra for adjusting course on the fly. The canoe was your home, your lab, your lifeboat. Historians still argue whether some of these tools, like floating sea anchors made of palm fronds, were for navigation or stabilization. The theory is that in stormy seas, you could toss one overboard to slow your drift, making it easier to judge your heading when the clouds blocked the stars. Was it scientific or spiritual? Nobody's sure. But if it kept you alive, does it matter? You watch now as two older trainees perform a gear check ritual. They chant softly while inspecting knots, tapping the hull in certain places, even listening to the pitch of the wood. It sounds silly until you realize they're checking for cracks by sound. A hollow tap means trouble. A full one means you're good. The elder pulls out a small pouch made of woven reeds. Inside a star charts, simple ones drawn on bark cloth. No ink, just char and pressed pigment. You run your finger along one. It's not a map, it's a memory prompt. The shapes guide recall, not direction. You don't use it out there, the elder says. You remember it before. Everything, it seems, is preloaded into the navigator's head. Not just the route, but how the canoe feels at certain speeds. How ropes should sound when they stretch. What to smell for when you're within 50 miles of land. This isn't travel. Put choreography dot by nightfall. Your fingers are blistered, your shoulders sore, and your brain stuffed full of materials, knots, fish tricks, and water storage hacks you never thought you'd need. And yet, there's a strange comfort in it. Like knowing how to sew a wound. Like building IKEA furniture with nothing but string and a seashell. You look out at the water and whisper to no one, I could do this. Then you laugh. You've said that before. Usually right before something goes very wrong. But tonight, you believe it a little. The canoe creaks softly beneath your weight as you push off from the shallows. This time, there are no elders, no audience, just a handful of trainers yourself, included each, one chosen to take part in a test sail. Not a race, not a demonstration, a silent twilight journey under the stars, with no modern equipment and no turning back until dawn. The sky is velvet now, thick with stars that look close enough to pluck from the air. You grip the paddle, exhale slowly, and begin to row. It's happening tonight is where everything you've absorbed over weeks of watching, listening, fumbling with knots, and stubbing your toes on driftwood finally matters. And now you must prove it without speaking. Only gestures are allowed. Sound is sacred. Your canoe becomes a ghost on the water, slicing between dark swells under a field of ancient constellations. Your assigned job is to guide the canoe by using Te Lapido's faint underwater light flashes you've heard about, seen once, maybe twice the catch. There's no guarantee you'll see them again. So, as backup, you rely on what the elders call star hopping, navigating not by one star, but by transitioning across a chain of them like stepping stones across a river. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Polynesian voyagers used a system of star paths. Each island was associated with the rising and setting points of specific stars. To sail from one island to another, navigators would memorize the sequence of stars that aligned along that route. They didn't just know what direction to go. They knew what the sky should look like at each point along the way. Like building a highway out of constellations, your canoe glides toward the west, and the first major landmark is Hoculia Arcturus, glowing like a watchful eye just above the horizons. Your point, your partner adjusts the sail, and the canoe shivers as it speeds up behind you. Another trainee is lying on their stomach, trailing fingers over the side of the hull, not for fun. They're feeling the shape of the swellets, angle, frequency, and rhythm. Are the waves wrapping round a nearby reef? Does their pull suggest you're drifting south? You marvel at how subtle it is. The ocean gives clues like a cat indirectly when it feels like it. Here comes your quirky tidbit. Some Polynesian navigators were said to sleep with small, polished stones under their backs positioned at pressure points, so that if the canoe's movement shifted during the night, the navigator would wake instantly. Talk about built-in GPs with pain sensitivity. And here comes a question you've heard all too often from skeptics. How did they sail thousands of miles without compasses or maps? Well, here's the part that historians still argue about. Some say it was all based on memorized observation, decades of trial and error passed down orally. Others believe there were systems far more complex, involving coded chants, shadow measuring rituals, and lost instruments now buried in legend. But few even suggest that Polynesians created early analog computers using bone frameworks or stick maps more advanced than we give credit for. Whatever the truth, it's working. Because your canoe is still moving steadily west. Your stars are lining up, and no one has gotten seasick. Yet the wind picks up now. It's stronger, chillier. You reach out to test it cool against your palm, rushing from the southeast, exactly as expected. The trade winds, they're your jet stream. These winds don't just assist your journey, they define it. The whole reason east to west voyages were possible was because of the reliability of these winds. That and the deep knowledge of when they would shift. Someone clicks their tongue behind you 3 short beats. A silent signal. Time to check the swell. You squat low, close your eyes, and feel. Here comes the magic again. You notice the canoe is no longer bouncing evenly. There's a slight resistance on the left, a sign that you're hitting a cross current. You lean forward and point north-northwest. The lead paddler nods. The course is adjusted. No panic, no lights, just a gentle pivot in rhythm. Hours pass, like syrup, slowly, softly. The stars pivot above you, shifting as the earth spins you onward, and it hits you. This is how they did it. They stayed awake, stayed attuned, and let the sky move while they followed its steps, like dancers in a never-ending celestial waltz. You blink as the eastern sky begins to warm with a grey-blue whisper. Not quite dawn, not yet, but close. You lean back and whisper, "We're still on track." Another click of the tongue behind you. Affirmation. Even the silent language has rules here. Then, out of nowhere, a dark shape on the horizon. Pew! Squint. Could it be land? No one says a word, but everyone is already adjusting. Speeding up, the rhythm changes. Hearts quicken, and there it is, faint, blue-green, rising like a memory from the water's edge. Your first guided journey, and you've made it, without compass, clock, or chart. You beach the canoe as the sun peaks over the horizon, orange gold and blinding. The others cheer, softly no whooping, just quiet joy. You step onto shore, and the elder is already there, waiting. How did he get here? You don't ask. He nods once. That's all you need. You've earned the stars. The fire crackles low now, just glowing embers in a bowl of stone. You're wrapped in a woven tapa cloth, your skin still tingling with salt and sun. Around you, the others speak in quiet tones, retelling the moments of the journey with gentle smiles and sleepy laughter. But mostly, there's silence, the kind of silence that doesn't need filling. Because you did it, not just the sail, not just the knots or the stars or the water jars tied down tight. You felt it, the rhythm of the sea beneath you, the language of winds through coconut leaf sails, and the ancient confidence of people who crossed thousands of miles before anyone else even guessed those islands existed. You tilt your head back. The sky is lighter now, but stars still hang overhead like fading lanterns. You try to count them again. You lose track by 27. Here's your final mainstream historical fact. Polynesians reached nearly every inhabitable island in the vast Pacific, including Hawaii, New Zealand, and Easter Island, long before any Europeans ever entered those waters. They did this not by accident or by drifting. They did it intentionally, repeatedly, and with a navigation system so effective that modern recreations using traditional methods have successfully retraced those routes to this day. The Polynesian Voyaging Society's Hockle a Canoe, launched in the 1970s, proved this beautifully. Here's your quirky tidbit. In the absence of fresh water, some navigators trained themselves to sip seawater slowly in tiny amounts and meditate to reduce water loss through sweating. Some could even identify nearby islands just by changes in bird flight patterns and cloud reflections. Not myth's actual skills. But of course, historians still argue whether these abilities were truly widespread, or if they were restricted to a handful of exceptional individuals. Some suggest that only a select caste of master navigators tammed this secret knowledge, and that it was guarded with strict codes and rituals. Others argue it was far more democratic, passed from parent to child in rhythm with daily life. Either way, the skill was nearly lost. Colonialism, disease, missionary influence, they all chipped away at the oral traditions. By the 20th century, only a few master navigators remained, most notably Mo Pialog, from the Micronesian island of Satawal. He became the living bridge between past and future, teaching modern Hawaiians how to read the sea like their ancestors once did. No instruments, no engine, just the old ways, taught the old way by showing, not telling. You sit beside the fire and imagine that first time someone stepped onto a new island. Sand beneath feet sore from months at sea. Lush green forest in the distance. A beach littered with driftwood and promise. They must have been terrified and thrilled. Maybe they shouted, maybe they cried, maybe they just collapsed and kissed the ground. And maybe, just maybe, they looked up at the stars again, nodded to the sky and whispered, "We'll remember this." Your thoughts are drifting now, like canoes, like clouds. You think of your fingers tracing invisible paths between constellations, of hot stones in gourds and fishhooks carved from bone, of clouds reflecting atolls and birds circling invisible shores. Of chants that hide coordinates and fires that wake with friction alone. You think of how much we've lost and how much remains, quietly waiting in the stars and the water. And then you realize, it doesn't matter if you remember every name, poor tie, every perfect knot. What matters is that you paddled, you trusted, you learned, and now you know. You've earned your silence. You lie back, eyes fluttering closed, and let the rhythm of the waves return, like the earth itself rocking you to sleep. And now, with your eyes barely open, and your mind still gently floating among stars and salt air, we let the final part of our journey fade into softness. The sky above has quieted, the wind has gone still, and the ocean so vast, so full of life and memory settles into the rhythm of your breath. You're no longer on the canoe. You're cradled in your bed, wrapped in the echo of long-lost chants and lullabies woven by waves. The calluses on your hands fade into warmth beneath the covers. The taste of salt leaves your tongue. You no longer need to scan the horizon. Revive out there. Islands wait patiently. Stars continue to rise and fall. But for now, there is nowhere to go. Nothing to solve. Nothing to prove. Your breathing slows. The sound of paddles against water becomes the rustle of your sheets. The creak of the mast becomes the hum of the fan in your room. And the deep blue darkness of the Pacific becomes the comfort of your dreams vast. Gentle, endless dot. So let yourself drift. Let the fish disappear back into coral. Let the sails come down. Let the canoe anchor itself in the harbor of your sleep. You've traveled far tonight, farther than most ever will. And now, finally, truly, you can rest. End of script. Sweet dreams.